Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. I wanted to wait till this weekend to do the episode because I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, watching the CrossFit Games, which are absolutely amazing. And I know many of you are either just about to start your career or just got a job, or maybe you're even struggling to get a job. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on nationally, what I'm seeing and hearing, and then maybe some tips that are coming up to help you out. So we will have a couple of episodes with some APPE students this week, and then next 2 weeks I'm actually going to have someone on from a pharmacy recruiting company that it's a national recruiting company, and they are super experienced with jobs and helping people get jobs and knowing what to do. And we're going to have an actual 4 different episodes, an introductory episode, and then 3 episodes that talk individually to parts of the actual interview. While I know generally you hear, okay, well, I want to hear a retail interview or a hospital interview, what we're going to do is we're going to break down the interview itself into 3 main parts. But let me talk a little bit about working out, fitness, and then the CrossFit Games, and certainly update you on what's going on in pharmacy. So it's around now that usually July 1st marks when people start getting training for the Des Moines Marathon. Des Moines Marathon is usually around mid-October. And you say, well, that seems a long ways away. August, sorry, it's August. Beginning of August is when people start going for getting their training down for the Des Moines Marathon. And so we do August, September, and then half of October. So about 10 weeks tends to be what it is. And so I went today to try to do my long run a little bit early. So I should do about 3 hours effort, maybe 18 miles if I was going to do 10-minute pace, or maybe do 15 miles, 2.5 hours. But very easy 10-minute pace. But around mile 8, my ankle was feeling a little bad, and I didn't really know what to do. So I just laid off it and just said, okay, we'll do 80-minute run today, and then I'll see if I can do any run tomorrow, and if not, then I'll make it up with the bike. But I wanted to tell you that as you're getting out of school, things are not going to work as a curriculum does the last 4 years, the last, 18 years of life you've been in college. And each year there's a program. This is what's going to happen. And if you're moving on to residency, you're kind of not there yet. It's certainly something a little bit different. You've been in residency for a month now. When you're in residency, it's still a program. You're still going by an accreditation document. You're still being evaluated each quarter on the goals that you're meeting. You're supposed to do something for the national meeting. Everything's kind of planned out. But for those of you that don't have things planned out, things are very different. And I think it's really just I think one thing that was really got me is how little students fail in pharmacy school, and before pharmacy school maybe, but right now, because there are so few applicants and so many pharmacy schools, what they're really trying to do is trying to retain every single student. And I think this is, I get it, once you pay your money for pharmacy school, you should graduate, and I get it from that standpoint. And I want to take you back to how it used to be. So it used to be where you would go in, especially in medical school, you would go in, sit down, you say, look to your left, look to your right. Half of these people aren't going to be here. And you think, wow, that was really draconian, that was really backward thinking. They didn't do any any patient care over the first 2 years. That's really, really, not the way that we should be doing things. But let's take a different look at it. What they were really doing was saying, let's see who can handle this before we put them in front of our patients and spend our most valuable precepting time with them. And what they were really doing was seeing who was really committed to the process. Now, the issue, of course, with that is You may have people that are very good with patience that may not be as good in terms of taking tests and passing those tests and those things. But in general, you got used to failure. You got used to having that feeling of, I don't know if this is for me, and then having to really search in yourself and see if it really is for you. Now that they're just, it's, when you see a college that passes what it's like a 55% NAPLEX pass rate or something like that, and a couple that, schools you see where only maybe 3 out of 4 people will pass the NAPLEX, and that's not even going to the law to even decrease that, and that doesn't include the 11% attrition. So that means that really in that one school, half the students made it to the finish line, which would be graduation on time and passing the NAPLEX on the first try. And I think the issue is that schools are so worried about not letting students fail and not recognizing that students are saying, hey, you know what, this isn't for me, that they're so worried about passing them that they allow them to get to the finish line when they really shouldn't even be there in the first place. They might be better in a different field or a different area or something like that. The people that I found actually do the best are the ones that maybe did actually fail a year, had to repeat a year, and they only had to maybe repeat one class, so they had other time to make up some other things. And I found that those have the most extraordinary careers right now. So what I guess I'm saying is there's really not much failure in your life as you've gone through, and that's really, really a bad thing, because as you're coming into the workforce, you're going to see a whole lot of failure. You're going to see a whole lot of rejection. There was a great book called Rejection Proof, and it was about this guy who went, and I think he did 100 things and tried to get rejected 100 times in 100 days. For example, he went and said, hey, can I play soccer in your backyard, to somebody? Or he said, hey, can you make me donuts in the shape of the Olympic rings? So it was just very cool, very clever things. And I know that went viral, and then he wrote the book. But right now, your chances of getting rejected are very high. And a lot of times people shy away from it because of that rejection, when it's really the rejection that leads you to where you really want to be. So many people are like, gosh, I don't know what I want to do next. Well, you may not have tried enough things. You may not have been rejected enough times. And I know that sounds a little bit draconian, sounds a little bit harsh, but I want to kind of take it to the CrossFit Games, where it really shows you that someone who has these abilities is going to be good in this event, and someone who has these abilities are going to be good in that event. And the support community at CrossFit is second to none. It's unfreaking believable. And I'm not a CrossFitter. I just saw it on Netflix like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said, this is really cool. And I started looking at some of the workouts they were doing, and I was going, oh man, I've got the shoulder thing from when I was in high school, and it's got a back thing, but maybe I'll join CrossFit. That seems pretty cool. But I want to talk about the events and how some of the athletes have handled it, and how some of the athletes have really just shown how they know themselves, and they know their own abilities, and that they know what it is to fail, and that when you fail, you learn from it, and you just do the best you can at some things that maybe you're not good at. The first event, I didn't go see it. It's the Criterion bike, and I'm not familiar with that type of biking, but it was 10 laps for time. It's about 1,200 meters per lap. So if you want to see how long that is, that's about three revolutions of a track, like a high school track. So it's not very big when you're talking about biking. And some of the best athletes did the worst in this event. And one athlete, who was an amazing athlete at the top of the leaderboard, lost the chain to the bike. Another one lost the clip, and some of the athletes have never worked with clips on bikes before. And so it's each time, and it's kind of a hot mess, like what it is that's going to happen, what it is you're going to do. And that's kind of what makes it so fun for the spectators too. But the bike was So a lot of people that really were used to being in the front were not. So then you go to 30 muscle ups for time. And a muscle up is basically you hang from rings, like gymnastics rings, and then you swing up to a push press and do kind of a dip, and then you come back down. And you may hear the term broken or unbroken, or how many did they break after? And to break means that, maybe you did 5 and then you broke. So you go down and then you come back up and then do 5 more or something like that. And I think someone did 28 unbroken, which is unbelievable. But then you go to muscle ups, and the ability in a bike versus the ability in a muscle up is very, very different. You're talking about a very, very fast muscle twitch, movement with the muscle up. And then the bike is someone not really an endurance athlete when you're talking about, only 12,000 meters total, but still very different. So then you go to the CrossFit total. This is just pure muscle strength. 1 rep max back squat, 1 rep max shoulder press, and 1 rep max deadlift. And I haven't even messed with this stuff. This is the stuff I'll look at later, but these are really the giants, the ones that are just super strong. And really, some of these CrossFit athletes, you would look at them and go, wow, that's not what I expected from a bodybuilder. But the other thing you should know about CrossFit is that women and men are equal. And the funny thing is that's kind of funny to say, because when I say equal, this morning in the Madison Triplus or the Triplus, the swim, the women, the lead women beat the lead men. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're equal on time. Sometimes the women are faster, sometimes the men are faster. But the payments and all of the things that go along with it are equal. There are an equal number of events. They're the same events. They do the same things. So the next one was the longest event in CrossFit history. CrossFit's been going on, I think, 10 years is how long they've had the games. And it's 42,195 meters. It took the men about 3 hours. I think one of them finished just under 3 hours. Women were just a little over 3 hours. And those 4 things happened in one day. And so you have this range of emotions going from this to that, and you go down, and then you come back up again. And then Thursday is a day of rest. They didn't do anything on Thursday except come out for the where you introduce the athletes in the beginning, or it was like late at night, 6 or 7. Anyway, so then they go to Friday, and then comes the battleground. It is hot. Well, it isn't hot for the guy. The guys got lucky. It was very overcast, very cool in the morning. They did this drag of. It was sponsored by the Marines, so you drag a body. It's Rescue Randy drag, and then you do 2 rope climbs, and then you run an O course, an obstacle course. Come back for 2 rope climbs, then do Rescue Randy drag, and then there was I think it was about 1,200 meters of run in between. The men are wearing a 20-pound vest. The women are wearing a 14-pound vest. And it was just so many people failed on the women's side coming in, and a couple on the men's side, where they were coming in towards the end, and you could see they just had nothing left. And I just feel like in your search for a job, in your search for a career that you want, in your search for a life that you want, that's how you feel, where you were just so close and then you missed it again. And then in the afternoon, they didn't announce it till maybe 1 or 2 hours before the actual event, was the clean and jerk speed ladder, which I think was one of the best events of the whole game so far in terms of audience, not necessarily participation, but just how cool it was. So to explain what it is, a clean and jerk speed ladder, a clean and jerk is taking the weight from the deck, bringing it up, and then pressing it over your head. And then you start with, so the men started with 245 pounds, worked their way up all the way to 345 pounds in the final. Women started with 155 pounds, worked their way up to 225 pounds in the final. And so what made it so awesome is how fast it was. So you do these 5 weights. So you do 1 at 245, 1 at 255, 1 at 265, 270, 275. And each time you put it down, you run over it and then go to the next one. And the first one had a 1 minute time cap. And so a cap means that you once you go to the cap, that's it. The game's over. You get scored at how close you were, to maybe the finish line or something like that. It depends. But the men went through theirs, and then there's just one person that just was just super strong and stronger than the others. But the women's was really kind of the highlight event, and that's what's kind of amazing about this sport is that where you see college basketball and it's packed for the men and it's dollar ticket night for the women. It's actually probably the opposite here, where you would see people going into the stadium because it's the women's event. And this has a lot to do with the way CrossFit works, is that it's made up of men and women in the gym working together as a single community. So we get to, the first rounds go. You've got the first round, which is, I think 37 athletes are left in the women's. There's some that got hurt. Then down to 20 athletes, and then down to 5. So here you are. They do the clean and jerk for 205 pounds, then 210 pounds, then 215, and then 220, and they were like neck and neck at 220, two of them, and then someone won. But it was the 5th person on the 225 that was, I guess, the most inspirational. You've got probably 8,000 to 10,000 people cheering, people working out. And I think in some ways, working out for many people is a very lonely thing. You get up way early in the morning, you go lift weights, you go to work. If you're a pharmacist, you go to the drive-thru or the basement. It's a very lonely thing. This CrossFit is the exact opposite. It's a community of people who are supporting each other. And here, these are 4 of the top and most fittest women in the world that have already gone in. Cara Sanders, I think, Annie David's daughter. I'm not sure who the other one was. I know Sarah Sigmund's daughter was 6, so she wasn't in the finals. But anyway, so we're at the 5th position, and she doesn't actually have to lift the weight. The rules say you're supposed to continue the workout until time expires. But clearly, she's made an effort to try to get the 225 up. She failed, and she didn't do it. But she had about 30 or 40 seconds. And she was walking up to the girls that are on the stand that have already gone up. And she's kind of saying, I'm done. I don't need to do this. But then the crowd rose, and there were 8,000 or 9,000 people there. They're all cheering. So she goes back and she says, all right. And she goes back and she puts up 225. And it's just amazing because the clean and jerk, you have to get it up first, to your shoulders. And so there's just this big 2-part thing. And so she gets it up there, gets solid there, puts it over her head, gets through. And it's just so inspirational to see these athletes competing at this level. And then, later on, they have to do the Fibonacci sequence, which is 5 handstand. So the Fibonacci means that you add the 2 numbers to make the next one. So it's 5, 8, 13. So first they do 5 handstand push-ups, and then they do 5 double kettlebell lifts. Now, I don't remember what the weight was for the women. Most of the women finished. But the men, the weights were 203 pounds each. And so they lift the double kettlebells 5 times. Then they go back for 8 handstand push-ups, 8 kettlebell lifts, 13 handstand push-ups, 13 kettlebell deadlifts. And then after that, their reward is to do an overhead lunge with 2 kettlebells, not the big, huge ones, for 89 feet to the finish line. And here's an event that only one man of the, I think 30 or 40, I think there were about 35 left at the end. 35 men had finished. So here's something that they've all failed. And here they come back and they call it redemption. And that's what the name of the Netflix thing is. It's like the redeemed and the dominant. And I think that's really what graduating pharmacy school is going to be about for you guys now. It's about redemption. You've graduated and you're in a market that is extremely tough. You're going into a position where you may or may not get something that you want to do, and then when you do get there, you may find that it is or it isn't what you expected. So what are you going to do once you get there? And that's where really the redemption comes in. It's all right. So you've taken a position. Now you know that this isn't for you. What's the next step? And then that's where, where I continue to try to get people on that are doing just tremendous things. A non-traditional pharmacist does a good job of giving some hints. In the YFP community, the Your Financial Pharmacist community, we saw those things. And there are just, the reason why it's so hard to succeed in pharmacy now, or why the people that are succeeding are so hard to emulate, is that it is completely individualized. What makes my pharmacy career extraordinary for me is completely different than what makes it extraordinary for Eric Christensen or Todd Urey or Tim Albrecht or, well, Todd's not a pharmacist, but he's best pharmacist supporter in the country. And, TLDR pharmacies, Brandon Dyson and, Jackie Boyle and, Adam Martin and all these influencers that you see out there. And what is it that makes theirs so extraordinary? It's not that they did the best at this competition where they all have to do the same thing. It's that they recognized their strengths and they did the very best in those things that they were strong at. And then they did as best as they could in the things that they're not strong at. So today, the Madison triplets, the 3 Australian men came in, 1, 2, 3. And first of all, the women crushed, the men with the swim. So it's that it's equal is not necessarily true. The women can beat the men or the men can beat the women in certain avenues. But the swim is something people are comfortable with. But the paddle is about balance. And if you've had that balance, if you've been a kid who was, a surf rescue person, then you've been on the paddle before. And for others, it's just a nightmare getting through it. And then the run. And that's what it is over and over again. And then I'm going to go see Chaos, which is, I have no idea what it is. I think it's like 20 or 30 minutes. I think it's like 20 minutes. So it's going to be something insane, I'm sure. And check that out and see what it is. And I guess I just want to, after this long kind of diatribe, tell you that when you're trying to fit your career, and before, when you could usually kind of look at somebody ahead of you, and that's usually advice a lot of people give, is that you have to look ahead of you to see what that person is doing. It's not true anymore. You have to look at kind of what you've been doing and what you've been successful at and enjoyed and what you didn't, and then go towards that direction. I mean, I would have never said, okay, well, 20 years from when I graduate from pharmacy school, I'm going to be a full-time community college instructor in chemistry and pharmacology, and I'm going to make a living, writing books for people who struggle with pharmacology and chemistry, and also I'm going to be a marathoner. Like, those 3 things were just not in my life 20 years ago at all. And though there were sparks where I saw parts of what I wanted, and I just had to fail at certain things over and over again. Just like today I failed. I wanted to run, 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and I only went 80 minutes. So what am I going to do tomorrow to make up for that? And it'll probably be, maybe I'll be able to run 4 miles. Maybe I'll be able to run, 12 or 15. I don't know. If not, then I get on the bike and I make it up on the bike. So again, it's all about persistence and getting through. But I think that if you've not seen it, I would check out Crossfit, the Redeemed and the Dominant, and just check out what it is. It's just very, very cool. So let's get to the pharmacy news and what's going on. So TLDR Pharmacy, July 25th, they had their Biostatistics and Literature Evaluation Part 3. And then also they have a student loans a blog post as well. So if you're struggling with student loans or you're trying to get the math right for BCPS or for NAPLEX, that's a great place to go. Real Life Pharmacology, new episode. Again, it's just keeping up with them. So the last three have been thiazide and thiazide-like diuretics, urinary anticholinergics, and sulfamethoxazole. It's completely free, reallifepharmacology.com, or listen to Eric Christensen's podcast. Those are fantastic. Alex Barker came up with my pharmacy student advice to have a happy career. This was about a week ago, but it's quite extensive. And I think it's a lot tougher to figure out where you should or shouldn't go. But what his blog post does is do a good job of explaining where maybe you can kind of figure out like, oh, okay, this is why I'm not enjoying, or this is why I am. Mothership, pharmacy podcast. So the last one was on, I want to say, Tuesday, protecting your patient's data. So talking about HIPAA from R.J. Hedges and Associates, and then the National Association of Specialty Pharmacy doing a satisfaction survey. So again, the business of pharmacy, a number of episodes there. Your Financial Pharmacist brought back Adam and Brittany Patterson, or I think they'd been on before. And they'd graduated from Auburn, I think, and Tyler Dalton, who is a great nutrition expert, who's now in Maryland, who's also an Auburn grad. He's kind of the one that got me into Auburn a little bit and understanding the SEC. And I went to Florida, but not having been a Southerner, and him being a Southerner and being in the SEC is completely different. But what is it to have life after being debt-free? And they're continuing to work very hard because they're very young. And it sounds like they're taking little mini retirements in the, kind of the 4-hour work week way of, that Tim Ferriss kind of recommendation that don't do your retirement at retirement, do your retirement as you go towards it. RX Radio so it was Dr. Richard Waite and I think his fiancee were on the Pharmacist Couple Talks, the community to hospital transition. And I know many of you want to do that, and you're hearing the same thing over and over again. Well, you've got to do a residency. And while a residency is very doable now, there's so many of them, it may not be doable with what's going on with your life. But there's a new one, Unconventional Role, Soft Skills and Being Fearless. I don't know what that one's about. I'll check it out today while I'm at the games. And then I saw Kevin Yee did have something new. I want to say it was, it was Fear of Laziness. I haven't listened to it yet. Brian Fung, he expanded his trailer to about 1.5 minutes from a minute, but I'm looking forward to the full report there. He's going to England and Iceland and kind of at a point in his life, pharmacy life, where he just wanted to take a break and kind of think about things. And I'm kind of doing the same thing here with Madison. Just I finished another audiobook, or working with an audiobook, and we're going to get to the semester here, so I wanted to take a weekend off, and then my wife was nice enough to watch the kids while I did that, and then I'll be back tomorrow. And then the big one is Paul Tran's being an Amazon pharmacist. He does a pretty good job, about 7 minutes, of going over the pharmacy and Amazon entering the pharmacy business. Then we also heard Major and Darshan on the Pharmacy Podcast Network, and then Richard Waite also had somebody from the PillPack company. So plenty going on in pharmacy right now. I'm always happy to respond to any emails or things like that. aaguerra@dmac.edu, or you can always find my contact information at memorizingpharmacology.com. But I want to give you some encouragement that if things are not going well, and if things are in a point where you don't feel like you're in a place that you should be, you may not be, but it's time to kind of start looking at other options, I think, outside of pharmacy, because right now pharmacy is so saturated that even if you get a job, it's likely not going to be the job you want and the position you want. And I saw on Facebook just was a couple days ago that, and I don't know, this is anecdotal, but I heard Walgreens did not give raises, and I heard Walgreens is saying no transfers, which means that, or you have to apply for transfers. So instead of just, okay, I'm going to transfer from this district to this other one because my wife or husband got a job somewhere else, now you have to apply for the job as a regular applicant. And I don't know how that works with 100 applicants, 200 applicants, or anything like that. So I think things are going to be really tough, and I think that you really should start thinking outside of pharmacy before you even go towards that October, interview session at your college. Um, we are cranking out pharmacists at a pace that is unsustainable, but don't think that it's going to slow down. And I tell you why this is. Let me give you a quick analogy. If you look at Southern Cal or Santa Barbara or UCLA, and you go to their film program, which are some of the best in the country, and you say, okay, well, your actors don't really get much work, so when are you guys going to close your acting schools? Like, that's silly. That has nothing to do with anything, right? And the reality is that the more you go into residencies, the more able more schools are able to continue to take as many students as they really want, because what the government looks at is after college, in that first year, did you get a job or move on to something else? And now we've gone from 14% students going to residency with very many fewer students to now 25% going to residency. And so the more, if ASHP gets what they want, everyone that's going to be in a clinical position gets a residency, and that maybe they double it to 10,000. What that does is it takes the schools off the hook. They don't have to get students jobs anymore because they've gotten a residency. And once they've gotten a residency, then that counts as to the federal government as, okay, well, they've graduated from college and now they have this job. The average student paying back loans is about 14 years right now, and that's from 14 years ago. So that's 2004 to 2018. From 2018 on, we're probably going to be seeing closer to 20 years, I think. It's at 160,000, and with just the volatility that we have, what we really need, and this may sound strange, is for pharmacy schools to get pharmacists out of their positions. And what I mean by that is there are many pharmacists who are unhappy with their jobs, and they don't know what to do. If the pharmacy schools and the colleges themselves could get them, maybe it's MBA school, maybe it's MPH school, whatever it is, some kind of training to get them out of the job to make places for these new students that are coming in. So it's going to be a little rough road here for a while, but again, we're here at the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast, and then certainly the Greater Pharmacy Podcast Network to try to support you as you have your questions and lead you to people that maybe can help you as well. So have a good weekend, and I will talk to you next week.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.